Republicans are talking a lot these days, trying to convince Americans that they're the ones who support children and families, not Democrats. The Republicans talk about supporting small businesses. They talk about competing with China. They talk about how terrible it is that nobody can afford a home in America. And they talk about cracking down on fraud in government programs. The bill that the Senate will vote on in a few minutes helps with each and every one of these issues.
With election politics front of mind, doomed to fail show votes have become an all too frequent occurrence in this chamber. But there is no more obvious show vote than the one scheduled to happen today.
On this vote, the yeas are 48, the nays are 44. 3/5 of senators duly chosen and sworn have not voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
So today, the Senate has a chance to move forward on the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act. Democrats are ready to vote yes to advance bipartisan legislation today. The question is, will Senate Republicans join us to give Americans a tax break, or will they stand in the way? The tax bill passed the House with an overwhelming vote of 357 to 70. It won majorities of both parties. It was led by the House by the Republican chair of Ways and Means, Congressman Smith, hardly a liberal. So we know this is good and broadly bipartisan bill. For people who say that this is not bipartisan, go look at the House. Everyone in Congress is on board, except Senate Republicans. Unfortunately, it seems like Senate Republicans plan to vote no today. Even House Republicans managed to unite long enough to pass this bill. With great respect to Senate Republicans, it's never a good sign to be more obstructionist than Republicans in the House.
It's been clear that the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act that Chairman Wyden wrote with the House needed some serious revisions in order to earn 60 votes here in the Senate. We don't need a vote today to tell us that's still the case. Colleagues on this side of the aisle have serious unresolved concerns. They don't like how more than 90% of the supposed benefits of the bill as written come as a $30 billion expansion of cash welfare instead of relief for working taxpayers. They're concerned about how it would weaken the work requirements tied to those benefits under current law. For a bill with the potential to so seriously impact working Americans, one might expect its proponents to engage seriously on resolving obstacles to bipartisan support.
Mr. President, I rise today with deep antipathy and disappointment for the persistent political games being played in this chamber. And as a pastor, I am particularly bothered when those games are played with children. Today, by all accounts, the Senate will fail to pass legislation with strong bipartisan support that will make a serious difference in the lives of everyday Georgians and their children. We were on track to do the right thing by our children. But once again, politics, as we enter the silly season of politics, is getting in the way. Extending the expanded child tax credit is not only the right thing to do morally, it is the smart thing to do economically. And I have to say that I find that often that is the case with our public policy. Very often, the right thing to do is also the smart thing to do. And it's politics and politics alone that gets in the way. Were it not for the cynical politics of Washington, passing this bill would be a no-brainer. The moral question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we so focused on the next election that we can't focus on the next generation? It's beyond nonsensical that there are some who have previously preached about the importance of lowering taxes, but they're getting ready to vote down a tax cut for middle and working class families. And I think it's important to underscore that point, because I recognize that the folks who are at home, when they hear words like tax credit, expanded child tax credit, they're engaged in their work. They may not readily know what we're talking about. It is a tax cut. That's what it is, a tax cut for middle and working class families. And when we passed it back in 2021, it was in fact the largest tax cut for middle and working class families in American history. But now we've got the same lawmakers who love to talk about the need to lower taxes on middle and working class Americans, an argument I hear often. They're getting ready to vote down this tax cut. And so the next time that I hear them talking about the need to cut taxes, I'm going to ask my colleagues, how did you vote today? How did you vote when you had an opportunity to provide tax relief for ordinary people? Maybe the issue is not so much tax cuts, it's for whom? Is it for those who need it the least, or those who could benefit from it the most? The bipartisan tax relief bill, negotiated in good faith by my friend, the senior senator from Oregon, is legislation that will offer a helping hand to ordinary families, because we know that when ordinary people thrive, the economy thrives. And the reason the economy thrives is because when people who do not have a lot of disposable income or virtually no disposable income, when they get a little bit of relief, you know, they buy extravagant things, you know, like a coat for their kid for winter, some more food, an opportunity to get some after-school enrichment. So that's what I think about. I think about a mom that I met in Columbus, Georgia, named Denise, who in the weeks after we passed the expanded child tax credit, she said to me, Senator, I'm so grateful that you all got this done. She said that she used those extra dollars to help prepare her daughter to go back to school and to help take care of her household as she was transitioning between jobs. It was a win for her, a win for her daughter, a win for the American economy. Let's be clear, the bill that we're taking up today would help reduce poverty for some 636,000 children in Georgia and their families. And if I'm honest, it's the kind of work that spurred me, a pastor, to get involved in politics in the first place. I put up with politics in order to do things like this. When we passed the expanded child tax credit, we literally cut child poverty 40% or more in America, but because we only did it for 6 months, we went back and doubled it. We can do better than that. And so these dollars are going right back into the economy, helping small businesses and helping local economies to be stronger. So we're helping families, helping businesses, helping our economy. Not only that, but we know that the smartest investment we can make is investing in our children. When we invest in our kids, especially in getting them out of poverty, we literally save them from the trauma, the actual trauma that poverty creates. And so I stand advocating, pushing, begging my colleagues to reconsider. You know, I grew up in public housing, and I wouldn't be standing here today if it were not for good federal public policy. I worked hard. I put my shoes on every morning. I come from a family that emphasized a strong work ethic But I needed all of that and good federal public policy to be standing on this floor right now. I am the beneficiary of Head Start, which, by the way, Project 2025 wants to go after. Head Start, which gives poor children access to literacy, sets the foundation for a good life. In high school, another good federal program called Upward Bound put me on a college campus during the summer and every Saturday, so I knew that I belonged on a college campus. And then Pell Grants and low-interest student loans ensured that I could make my way through college. The expanded child tax credit is a part of that good public policy, centering ordinary people. We strengthen their families, and we strengthen the American economy. The time to do that is now. The time now is not to focus on November, but to focus on what we can do right now. Dr. King was right. The time to do right is always right, and that time is right now.
The critical flaw with the bill is that it fails to provide meaningful tax relief to working families, and instead goes too far toward the Democrats' goal of turning the child tax credit into a subsidy untethered to work, which is fundamentally contrary to what the credit was created to do. For those who accuse Republicans of not caring about children, I would remind my colleagues that it was the Republicans who created the child tax credit. It was intended to provide tax relief to working families. Yet more than $30 billion of the cost to expand the child tax credit in this bill, about 91% of the money in this bill for the child tax credit, would go to individuals who pay no income tax. That isn't tax relief, it's a subsidy. And the bill's child tax credit provisions treat working family taxpayers as an afterthought. Not only do families with a federal income tax liability receive a mere 9% of the bill's child tax credit benefits, they also would be left waiting for that tax relief until 2 years after the benefits accrue to those with zero income tax liability. I've raised these concerns repeatedly before the bill was released. Unfortunately, by merely questioning the ratio skewed toward subsidies and asking whether working families should receive more tax relief, I and other Senate Republicans have been maligned for not caring about children and alleviating poverty. While Senate Republicans have also been accused of playing politics, the timing of today's vote, coupled with the lack of meaningful engagement since January to reach a compromise, confirms that the strategy was always a take-it-or-leave-it proposition in the Senate.
Over the last couple of days, I've read lots of comments from Republican senators who say that it's really time to wait, and if Republicans take control of the Senate, they'll write a better bill. So I would ask, better for whom? One thing I'm sure of is it won't be a better bill for the 16 million kids who stand to benefit today, colleagues, from the proposal we are going to vote on. And it won't come as any comfort to families who are getting clobbered on rent or the small businesses. They're going to fail if they don't get help now. The House of Representatives passed this bill back in January. It was the product of work with Republican Chair Jason Smith and I, but it also included a year's worth of negotiations with colleagues here in the Senate. That bill got 357 votes. Mr. President, almost an even split between the two parties. As I've said before, in the House of Representatives at this point it'd be hard to get 357 votes if you're just out ordering a piece of pie. The only reason our bipartisan bill didn't become law 6 months ago was because of the delay of Senate Republicans. I offered to make changes, Mr. President. I met with a significant number of Senate Republicans personally. They talked about what their proposed ideas were for compromise. And I offered them, I said it publicly in the Senate Finance Committee, wasn't good enough, although they looked a little bit like the dog that caught the car. But in old school basketball terms, Senate Republicans just continued the delays. It was kind of the old four-corner offense, stall and drain the clock. But for the millions of people who are hurting, those folks can't afford for the Senate to just keep waiting. Now, the reality is, when it comes to tax policy debates, this is the easy stuff. The difficult issues don't get agreement from 357 members of the House of Representatives. The debate on taxes is sure to get a lot harder when Congress is going to have to deal with trillions of dollars in tax changes coming down the pike. If Senate Republicans can't work across the aisle or work with a House that produced 357 votes, it's going to be some very, very heavy lifting next year. And I'll close with this. Every senator now has a choice. The results here are not predetermined. Republicans can choose to side with children and families. Republicans can choose to side with people who are walking an economic tightrope, just trying to pay the rent. Importantly, Republicans can choose to side with small businesses. The fact is, the problems small businesses are having today, to a great extent, are due to the single-handed efforts of Senate Republicans who did nothing to block an effort to derail the research and development credit. In fact, they were willing to derail the research and development credit in the 2017 tax bill when everybody said we need this to compete with China. Senate Republicans said, nah, we're interested in giving tax breaks to people at the top rather than small businesses. So they gutted the research and development tax credit for small business. Not a single Democrat voted for it. And then they promised to fix it in 2018, in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. All those years, Senate Republicans said they'd get a break for small businesses on the research and development issue. Now a lot of those small businesses have to go out and borrow to keep their doors open. So we offered to work that and other issues out, but Republicans said, gee, we're just going to wait around till 2025. Well, I want to say to my colleagues, and I want to say to the country, a lot of these small businesses, the research and development issue is a lifeline. I've had them come to me and say, Ron, I'm not even going to be around in 2025 for somebody like the Senate Republicans who wants to wait. I say we ought to help them now. And make no mistake about it, a Senate that passes this legislation can allow our bill to go to the President of the United States right away, and help goes out to those 16 million families, the 4 million small businesses that depend on the research and development credit, the families that got clobbered with disasters. We have a chance to help those families who, after they got clobbered with disasters, got clobbered by an outdated tax code. We would fix it. We would fix it today. And because of Senator Cantwell, hundreds of thousands of units of affordable housing could get on the way today. So, Senate Republicans can do those things that I just described. And the way I say it, Mr. President, you know, if you show up for work around here and you got a chance to help 16 million kids, 4 million small businesses, scores of businesses who've been clobbered by disasters, create hundreds of thousands of units of housing, doing all that, Mr. President, sounds to me like one hell of a day at the office. So Senate Republicans can choose to help that way, or they can continue with excuses, empty talk, and what are sure to be their plans for the future, lock in even more handouts to big corporations and the wealthy. This is a thoroughly bipartisan bill. 357 votes in the House of Representatives. Every Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee voted for this bill. So I say let's help the kids and the families. Let's help the small businesses. Let's help those who need housing. Let's be there for those who face these disasters. I say to my colleagues on the Republican side, this is a chance to help everybody in America. Everybody. I hope my Republican colleagues make the right choice. I strongly urge them to vote yes and side with the children and families all over the country, and I yield the floor.
On this vote, the yeas are 48, the nays are 44. 3/5 of senators duly chosen and sworn have not voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
Reconsider.
Motion is entered.
Thank you, Madam President. And once again, let me just repeat quickly, I'm just really saddened by the fact that our Republican colleagues have not voted for a bill that passed so overwhelmingly in the House, put together by a conservative Republican chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and that would do so much to help housing, help kids and families, and help businesses. It's a shame that they put politics over helping the American people.